For Global Business Update, Michael Wilson joins us now from London. Good morning, Michael.
Morning. First of all, Asia Pacific, and basically not an enormous amount happening there, as you can probably imagine, because of the momentous decision that we're going to get from the Fed later today, around about, it'll be our evening time, obviously, and your evening time too, and it's expected that there'll be a 0.25% rise there. I mentioned last week about China's luxury shoppers pushing up luxury goods stocks like LVMH and Richemont. Richemont is the people that own Cartier, for example, if you didn't know. The problem is that China is not Chinese citizens are not necessarily traveling abroad. They may be buying their luxury goods as a sort of when they've been released from lockdown, but they may be buying them domestically rather than coming overseas for them and going to duty-free shops and so on. So that's what they're actually seeing there. South Korea posted its worst ever in its recorded history, its worst trade deficit. And basically, this is all about this 16% down, which is actually quite a lot. And this is basically all about semiconductors, not replacing their smartphones and so on. But South Korea suffering quite a lot there. India today has its big budget discussion, walking the usual tightrope that everybody needs now, wants to promote growth, obviously, but then again needs taxes to come back to its coffers. So it's a very, very difficult day for India today. We'll have the results of what actually happened probably on the programme tomorrow. As far as the United States is concerned, yes, all paused really for the Fed meeting. The announcement of which on interest rates will probably be later this evening. It's expected that it will be a 0.25% rise this time. That's what the markets sort of costed in. But Jerome will stay very, very hawkish on what he's actually saying about the economy. In other words, he say don't get lulled in, just cool it a bit. Don't get lulled into a false sense of security. My major job is tackling inflation, and I will do whatever it takes. But it may just be that the Fed decides to slow its interest rate rises down a little. I'm just getting some breaking news actually that PayPal is laying off 7% of its workforce, facing very, very challenging, as it puts it, macroeconomic environment. Amazon, if you remember, is going through laying off 18,000 people, and Advanced Micro Devices (AMD) has seen a big fall in its semiconductor exports, down about 10%, and will go through a very, very difficult first quarter of the year. That's what they're expecting there. The EU, Brussels is being encouraged to dampen Ukraine's wishes to join the EU bloc. There are obviously discussions taking place about arming and fighter jets and all the rest of it as far as Ukraine is concerned. But this is slightly more fundamental. And because it is such a potentially large, and also poor country, there's a lot of problems being brought to the surface, particularly from France, which obviously fears a large agricultural nation because of its own agricultural needs and industry joining the bloc, and it may well undergo. So the French president is saying, for example, this accession to the EU may take not a year. Ukraine is very much hoping it'll happen by 2024. It could take decades. There's a lot of discussion to take place there. The UK is braced for its biggest strike day today. We've got teachers, train drivers, and civil servants. The TUC this is the first, which is the sort of the voice of the organised labour movement in the UK, is saying that this is really against the government digging in and not awarding pay increases to public services. Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Finance Minister here, has been facing a lot of criticism from within his own party about remaining strict on the budget. The budget next month in March, of course. But what he's saying is he's not going to offer tax cuts before 2024. That's what he's saying at the moment. And as far as the Northern Ireland Protocol is concerned, this rather difficult thing, it appears as though Rishi Sunak is obviously facing an enormous amount of pressure to get this fixed. It's one of those bits of legislation that was left dangling in the rush to get Brexit done under Boris Johnson. The feeling is that the sides are sort of coming together. There'll be green lanes and there may be red lanes as well, in the same way that there are with normal customs. But the idea is to speed goods through. And finally, oil. Exxon noted didn't have a big share buyback. In the same way that Chevron did. But ExxonMobil said that supplies are quite tight at the moment. They're awaiting, the oil price is actually awaiting the Fed and also the OPEC Plus meeting in a few days' time. And WTI, West Texas Intermediate, is being seen settling at about $80 a barrel until the markets become volatile again. That's the global view this morning.
All right, real quickly, I'm going to India this morning because it is said that India might usurp 2 or 3 other economies to be the third or fourth most dominant economy before the end of 2030. That's the news coming out there. And this budget means a lot because it's a big budget of push. But there's also the case of deficit, $118 billion in deficit for India. What's your outlook on this?
I would prefer to wait to see the details of what's actually in that budget, because, as I mentioned, I think it's some very, very tough decisions being made. Modi has always prided himself on being very pro-business, from Punjab, and he says that he knows about entrepreneurs, knows about business too, and this is really what really has to be nurtured, I think, in India. And quite right to focus on it. It is a growing population. I mean, all sorts of projections, as you know, have been made about where it's going to be and how big its economy is going to be. But this is really, really difficult for them, and they have considerable problems. I'm guessing that what may be in that budget will be an increase in infrastructure plans, but I couldn't be certain. I can't read the mind of the finance minister there, but he has all the cabinet has a really, really tough job to do.
All right, let's go to the England. Biggest strike or walkout in a decade. We have strikes from across 7 unions, teachers, train drivers, from the university and the likes. But I want to focus on the teachers' walkout. The National Education Union have said that from today they have 7 days where they'd be staging a walkout to protest again around pay, saying that in reflection of the economy, their pay hasn't improved. Now, parents have sympathize with them, saying that retention of teachers in the UK is very poor, and so their children's education is affected anyway, with the strike or without the strike, even with the teachers walking out because of the condition of employment. However, a criticism for Gillian Keegan, Education Secretary, that this government hasn't responded properly, to teachers and their concerns. I'd like to get your thoughts on this, and in terms of the teachers' wages and how well teachers in the UK are faring.
They're not. I mean, we're talking about state schools, presumably. They are not. They are not paid what they anywhere near the kind of value, if they're any good, they bring to the economy. I think the wrinkle that I don't like about it is, and I think that fortunately, I'm sort of beyond that, my own household here, but I think a lot of parents are very, very worried indeed, not least because there is no obligation, get this, there is no obligation for teachers to let their head teachers know as to whether or not they're going on strike. And a lot of them don't want to go on strike. And I know that you want to talk about teachers, but I'd like to bring in nurses as well. I have a neighbour in the village where I live who's an oncologist, and he does not want to go on strike. He says, I can't go on strike. I may be forced to do it, but I don't want to. And he says a lot of the nurses within his own oncology unit, dealing obviously with cancer, the patients cannot be just left. He can't walk away from his patients. And I think a lot of people are feeling that too. And I'm suspecting that a lot of teachers, because some are not there for the money. I mean, if you're there for the money, you're probably in the wrong job. A good teacher is a vocation, isn't it? Rather than a place to earn a lot of money. You simply do not earn a lot of money. I don't think that teachers are paid. Education does not attract people who are after money. If you want to do that, you go and work in the city, work for financial services and so on. So I think that bubbling it all up, I think that basically you've got teachers who are not sure whether they actually want to go on strike. I'm sure a lot do. They're under no obligation to get in touch with their head teachers and say, oh, by the way, I'm not coming into work today. And parents must be tearing their hair out right now, wondering whether or not to take the kids to school because they simply don't know. I don't think that's the way to go about this. But, you know, I mean, again, public sector people, public sector, you know, if you join the public sector, you don't go there for the money. You go there because it's the public sector. You feel you want to give something back to the country. And also, of course, what you do get is an inflation-linked pension at the end of it, which, of course, if you're working for a private company, that is absolutely not guaranteed, as you well know.
Well, Michael, we're trying to manage time, but within the short time available, two quick things. White House says ExxonMobil is making outrageous profits. The ExxonMobil boss says no, they are making profit because their strategy is very good. Obviously, ExxonMobil is going to fight back in case the White House is considering windfall tax, considering the fact also that they are taking the EU to court over the same matter. And then secondly, Jay Powell, we expect to hear from him at 2 p.m. Eastern Time today. Now, investors, S&P 500 companies, they are expecting that, it will be a quarter point. What if, the Federal Reserve decides to retain, maybe half percentage point or, even go higher, considering the fact that his commitment is to tame inflation, as you pointed out, not to S&P 500. How would the markets react?
I agree with you. It is very confusing, isn't it? And the markets have costed in a 0.25% interest rate rise. Why they do this and how they will react if it's not that and it's more, I suspect they will probably run and hide and people will sell like they normally do. This is the sort of volatility which is acting against proper investment and so on, because it's just, and I'm certain that what Jerome Powell will say is he will remain hawkish because that's his job. He will say that my biggest fight is inflation, and it's the same as it is in this country as well, because you'll be hearing a lot more of this. There is a phrase that cutting inflation is like a tax cut. You're hearing a lot of politicians using that kind of phraseology. It's beginning to catch on. Not necessarily true, of course, but that's what they're seeing at the moment. So he will defend his hawkishness, but what he will also be saying is, please just remain calm for the moment and just see if we can do this fight against inflation together. That's the sort of message I suspect that he will probably give about that. As far as ExxonMobil is concerned, well, I mean, they're talking about the oil market being excessively tight. They have not done a big share buyback and so on, and they will be opening themselves up to the usual kind of cries for a windfall tax. I mean, those are not going to go away. Whether or not they're effective or not is a different question. But those cries will not be going away as a result of whatever ExxonMobil actually says.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. Now for business updates across the African continent, Rotus Odiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. Good morning to all our viewers. Yeah, it's the month of love, and we need these new notes so we can spend.
Yes, especially bachelors, perhaps.
Oh, yes.
Bachelors will need new notes.
We need those new
to
notes.
buy flowers
and we need
chocolates.
You know how it is.
Bachelors and married men. Exonerate the married men.
Oh, yeah,
okay,
married people too.
Bachelors.
So, you've already played that special report on the central bank governor meeting with the House of Reps ad hoc committee on the cashless, drive and so on. And he clarified, of course, the fact that that February 17th grace period is pretty much just for, of course, the tender is no longer legal tender, but if we take a look at the parameters here, that 7-day grace period from February 10th to the 17th, which he mentioned, the CBN Act Section 20, subsection 3, is to allow people to go to a CBN center to go and pretty much move those notes through. And then you're looking at the CBN Act Section 20, subsection 3. And then Mr. Dogo was pretty happy with hearing from the central bank governor and said that, everything's fine now. But the House of Reps, they've approved the restructuring of the 1 trillion advance for the supplementary budget. So I think they're going to tweak that. However, they kicked the can down the road for the restructuring of the 22 trillion. And I don't know what, they're telling themselves, but as Tupac famously said, you can tell the people you roll with whatever you want, but you and I know what's going on. And everybody knows that what's going on is that this debt has to be sorted out at some point. So they can skip it for now, postpone it. The day of reckoning is still going to come. Transcorp. Vice President Osibanjo, well, he's throwing his weight behind the cashless economy, basically saying that it's going to help with, less vote buying, more tracing, more free and fair elections and the like. And then if you look at, the numbers, that's January through September of last year, we've seen an increase in instant, payments, mobile, POS, less checks actually, and or slightly more. But do you guys still write checks? Does anyone still write checks? And then e-bills as well, also climbing. I haven't seen a checkbook in like 3 years. So those are also. Matthew, you still write checks? Amazing. Okay. All right. And then Transcorp, I think about, 240 megawatts to the national grid with a new, I think it's the Transafam grid in Rivers. There's power station there. Basically, they've also, Transcorp, have set up cleaning rooms that allow them to actually complete maintenance for which is good, in the country, as opposed to sending them out of the country. We get to Ghana. They raised rates by less than expected, which might be a precursor to what we expect from the Federal Reserve later today, since inflation is decelerating in the States, but not in Ghana. Ghana has the highest negative real return in the world. So you look at year-on-year inflation at 54% as of December. Their inflation ceiling is 10%, so it is quintuple their ceiling. NPR, as you know, that was raised to 28%. So you 28 minus 54 is where you get that negative real return. And then interestingly enough, when people say Africa is a country, the IMF has asked Ghana to stop taking loans from the central bank. Does that sound familiar? Ghana had to plug its finances and they've been borrowing from the central bank. Apparently, according to Bloomberg, they've borrowed about 40 billion cedis, which is just 3.2 billion. And I say just because ways and means is about. So yeah, that's your Africa business.
I didn't say that. I just said it was ways and means anyway. But it just shows, when you lack discipline, you suffer. Yanis Varoufakis, former Greek finance minister, wrote a very important book. I've read that book 6 times over because it's sweet to read. It's called "And the Weak Must Suffer What They Must." You know what he said in the story? He told the story of Greece when they suffered the economic crunch and they became the begging bowl of Europe because they did everything wrong. A lot of people forget that prior to that time, Greece hosted the Olympics. That there was massive corruption. They splurged billions wasted. And when they became the begging bowl of Europe, everybody started tossing them around.
Especially Germany.
Because of our indiscipline, because of Ghana's indiscipline, you're seeing what they're suffering. Because of Nigeria's indiscipline, you're seeing what. That's why Moody has downgraded us again, C11, with a stable outlook. So the new leader that'll come in, and that's why I say Happy New Month is the month of breakfast.
Yeah.
Some people might get emotional breakfast, some people might get political breakfast at the end of this month. But one thing is certain, people will get breakfast. And it is how we carry on from here that matters for the economy. A very good spot as regards the Transco installation, 240 megawatts to our grid. I just hope it's sustained, and I just hope we work on our distribution so we can at least carry it out to the grid and give it to the small businesses that need it.
Yeah.
I am happy you talked about ways and means. Every nation must suffer what they must, and the weak must suffer what they must. It is sad that Nigeria, Ghana, we've become weak because of bad decisions over the years. And I'm happy Mr. Bola Ahmed Tinubu even talked about those bad decisions.
He's talking about the exchange
by
rates.
saying no brain. They didn't manage it well. From 200 to 800. It's very honest.
All right, I'll just touch very quickly on Osinbajo, VP Professor Yemi Osinbajo, who's been a bit quiet, hasn't he? Apart from condolence visits, and he's been a bit quiet. I mean, it's towards the end of his tenure.
Indeed.
But talking about his backing of the cashless economy, I think that goes without saying, because again and again we have talked about the importance of a cashless economy. The CBN had come out with a plan, especially around financial inclusion, getting the unbanked banked, and part of the redesigned policy is to promote, promote a cashless economy. However, as has been seen again and again, I don't know about you, but how has using your app been? For a number of Nigerians, it's been a nightmare in the past few days.
They've been overwhelmed.
Yes. So we talk about a cashless economy, but the question still begs, do we have the technological infrastructure to manage or to adopt a cashless economy? This is a big question. We need to ask bank questions. We need to find out what the plans are. It's not just to make, to introduce policies that are great like this. It's to ensure that there are, there's infrastructure to support great policies like that. So this is just to call out banks to begin to, if we're going to deepen, financial inclusion, we must ensure that we have the technology to support this.
Indeed.
Unfortunately, currently we don't.
Indeed.
Well, Ghana first. Under President Nana Akufo-Addo, the Ghanaian economy has been grossly mismanaged.
Facts.
Which was why, the Ghanaian cedi is one of is in fact considered probably the weakest currency in the world in terms of its value against the dollar. And hence, Ghana, finding itself in a fiscal space that it cannot manage any longer, had to go to the IMF. IMF has given, in principle, approval in principle, for a loan of $3 billion. But for the final approval, IMF does not come to your rescue without conditions. Some people call it conditionalities. One of the conditions they've given is zero financing for government, ways and means, either for the government or for the Cocoa Board. The Cocoa Board tried to put out bonds recently. In the past, the CBN, the Central Bank of Ghana, will step in. If it is undersubscribed, they will rescue the Cocoa Board. They did not do so this time.
No.
So this is a lesson. If you mismanage your economy and you go to IMF, they will slam you with conditionalities that could even put you in dire straits. Where is the irony? While you are telling us that Ghana, has been told that zero financing is what IMF is asking for with regard to ways and means. In Nigeria yesterday, our House of Representatives approved 1 trillion naira, which is also a way of approving ways and means for the government, which is a violation. We keep arguing of Section 38 of the CBN Act. Ironic. One story in Ghana, another story. But the House of Reps will say, well, we didn't go as far as the 22.7 trillion, but that's no excuse. So there are lessons we can learn from there finally. As for the CBN, I keep saying that grace period of February 10 to February 17 already takes care of the expectation of the House of Representatives. But what we don't know is the logistical problems that will arise. CBN is saying you come and redeem upon demand at CBN, not through the banks. How many Nigerians know CBN offices?
Exactly.
I can't remember when last I saw a branch of CBN in any part of Nigeria. But I know that they are. I know one in Abeokuta. I know the one in Broad Street in Lagos. But is it everywhere in Nigeria? And the average individual, how will he access the CBN as an individual carrying lorry loads of old notes?
Exactly. Good points.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rotus, for bringing
you.
us the African Business, Global African Business Report.